just using connection tools doesn't mean it's going to work out. Just doing all the things that you learned or that you take risks with, it doesn't mean it's going to work out. And when it doesn't, you have to have some compassion for yourself and say, I tried.
So, and in the last chapter, we talked about false pretenses and how they could be used against you when you were looking for connection. In this chapter, you seem to be talking more about not allowing connection to make you a slave.
Yeah.
And so it goes a step further. Can you talk more about what you want to accomplish here?
Yeah, so if I look at the progress we've taken through the book, I've basically said at the beginning, it's trust and respect, the foundation, what I always would say, the conditions of a relationship I want to be part of. So let's say those are there, or they're there enough that I continue. Then I'm going to have to work through some of my own issues, some self-love. I judge you, and then I sort of make peace with that judgment, and then I come and bring things forward, and then we try to see how far we can work it out. And maybe I really take some risks. Sometimes you meet me, sometimes you don't meet me. And what I've found in my own life is that that's all associated with personal responsibility. Yeah, that moment when I said the only thing that's wrong in all my failed relationships is me. So once I start doing that and then interacting with certain people, I say, wow, unfortunately this can't work. As much as I'd want it to, the conditions aren't there. I'm not getting what I need out of this relationship. I don't see it productive or helpful, or I see it's just not working for me anymore. And then that would be that moment when I would say, I really am at the moment I can love you from afar. Like I still love you, but we just can't be together. And this chapter came about when I sent the book to my editor, and he was getting in a divorce. And he said, Andy, you really need a chapter here. He said, because in a way, I've done all this stuff. And I get to this point and I realize that I can't make it work. And I still can love this person, but it doesn't mean that we can be together. So in that way, just using connection tools doesn't mean it's going to work out. Just doing all the things that you learned or that you take risks with, it doesn't mean it's going to work out. And when it doesn't, you have to have some compassion for yourself and say, I tried.
Yeah, it seems that, this book being all about connection, you think anybody reading it is going to have this desire to connect. And you've given people all these tools of how to look at themselves and move themselves out of the way through their biases, know their triggers, all this other stuff. So it seems like you want to test these tools. You want to push forward. You're taking personal responsibility for everything. You can just keep going down that path. Through the whole book, you're going down that path. What can I do differently? What might I be doing? What biases might I have? How do I create space between the trigger and the reaction? How do I? And you have that one out when you have, respect, your model. And that one thing, if it's not there, the conditions aren't there. And you can create it so you have those conditions, but there's nothing you can do about the other person.
Yeah.
And I think it's painful to feel like it's a failure because of all the effort that you've put in. And I think it's important to know that there's no obligation for it to work, because it's always taking two. Have you ever had an experience where it worked and then it didn't work? And then that love from afar, how it was able to be made possible, and then how it was sustained after in a way that could work, like where the separation actually worked better for the connection.
I've had situations with couples where they needed to love each other from afar to realize why they wanted to be back together again. So there was no animosity, because when I hold space in a couple, once they start projecting with judgment, like I'll slap them silly. I say, you don't get to say that. Like, what is the uncomfortable thing to say? And what I tend to see they'll keep saying is, I'm just not able to accept you that way. or I'm not able to deal with you when you're like that. And then they'll go and separate and do a bit of their own personal development work. And then they'll come back and then they'll realize that in general, often there's part of themselves they haven't accepted. And once they've started to make peace with that, then they can be back together with that person again. So that's happened certainly on 2 or 3 occasions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, there's been some cases where things don't work out and we've separated. And I should say that things kind of dissolved on their own. There wasn't a need for like a hard break.
Yeah.
And we actually became closer being further away.
Yeah.
I don't understand why, but at first I was like, well, you know what, that didn't work out, it's fine. But then what I realized is there's something about the separation that allowed us to have a good friendship and to actually support each other, which was shocking to me. Yeah. But I think part of it was that I was looking for a type of connection, a flavor of connection that wasn't going to work. And by separation, I got a different flavor of connection that ended up being more rewarding.
Yeah, with distance, the heart grows fonder.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's weird because there was never a romantic relationship there. It was like literally an interesting friendship of support through common interests and through just. It's amazing. It's amazing. So, but if you're right, if I was connected so closely, so much to needing the connection, just that may have made it so the separation would have hurt.
Yeah.
And because it was able to not hurt, there was able to not be animosity in the separation, it allowed for this other thing to blossom.
Yeah. Yeah, that I can imagine very much. It reminds me sometimes of like when someone dies, they might have been the most difficult person in the world, but once they're dead, all of a sudden they were like a saint. You take the things that are the beautiful parts of them and you hold on to those. So there is a bit of what I've seen is that if you can do that with a person before they're gone, that's beautiful. Yeah.